Witnesses for being here today. I'll just ask my question to all the witnesses, and whoever wants to jump in and answer, feel free to do so. So part of the reason why we are here today is to discuss the profitability of the oil and gas sector. I wonder if the witnesses could explain to the committee what has been happening to global demand for oil and gas over the last few years since the end of the pandemic, and how global demand relates to the profitability of Canadian oil and gas companies.
Well, maybe I'll take first crack, but demand for all hydrocarbons has been growing, and depending on who you believe, demand for oil this year will grow somewhere between 1.2 and 2.2 million barrels, and demand for natural gas typically grows at about 7 to 8 BCF per year. That doesn't necessarily translate into profitability for Canadian oil and gas because the other requirement we have is egress to those markets. And so without egress, our product typically gets landlocked and discounted. I think with the startup of the TMX pipeline, what we've seen is us getting much closer to global pricing for our oil. And I'm hopeful that with the startup of LNG Canada, we'll start to see improved gas pricing for producers there as well.
Over the last few years, China has continued to build hundreds of new coal-burning plants. Could Canadian oil and gas companies contribute to a reduction in global emissions by increasing Canadian oil and gas exports to China and to other countries?
I believe so.
Okay, Mr. Kruger, could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit? And can you speak to the emissions that come from a typical Chinese coal-burning plant compared to the Canadian oil and gas sector?
Well, I think you look at the energy sources and you look at the seriatim of carbon intensity. Coal would be at the higher end of that. Here in Canada, coke-fired boilers would be at the higher end of that. And as we go to fuel switching, natural gas in our case, or provide clean burning natural gas to China that displaces the need to build coal-fired plants, you are reducing the intensity of the global energy grid. And this is a global challenge, not a local or country-by-country challenge.
Recently, I met with management and the union of Evraz North America, which operates a steel mill just north of Regina, and they've experienced quite a lot of layoffs recently, and they would love the opportunity to build more pipelines for this country. Why doesn't the private sector build more pipelines in this country? And anyone who wants to jump in.
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's Michelle Harridens from Enbridge, and I think at the end of the day, we've talked quite a bit about the regulatory challenges and hurdles that come from investing in the country, and in particular, linear infrastructure such as ours faces many years and many levels of regulatory hurdles in order to be able to get in the ground and start delivering and provide that egress that Mr. McKenzie spoke to. That's the fundamental reason why.
And finally, I wonder if the witnesses could share with the committee what they feel would happen to global emissions if the oil and gas sector and the oil sands in Alberta were shut down tomorrow. Why don't we go with Mr. Kruger? How about?
Yeah, I don't think global emissions would improve if Canadian oil and gas were shut down tomorrow. I don't think global emissions would improve. The oil and gas would just come from other jurisdictions, and jurisdictions that would have a variety of carbon content and certainly have a much lower standard of ESG in general. And I know that, or I believe that, I should say, because I've worked in many of those countries.
And I wonder if some of the other witnesses could say whether or not they agree with that last answer.
We've got 10 seconds, basically.
I agree completely.
Yeah, I would agree as well. Global demand for all forms of hydrocarbon continues to grow. And we've said for a long time, those barrels should best come from Canada, where we produce the most responsible barrel globally.
Enbridge completely agrees as well.
So we think.
I would agree as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to follow up